We've got everybody here that intended on being here this morning. Nobody got derailed by whatever might have happened last night. It's good. I want to just make sure everybody knows accounts payable right here, back out in the lobby. First room, basically on your left, is where the other track will be going on today. I think this morning they're going over a website, e-commerce, in there. So first session I think is e-commerce website, and then after that the CRM. So just a heads up on that so you can see what's available. Here, like Kevin just mentioned, we're going to be in the very exciting world of accounts payable. All right? Creative ways to spend your money, basically. All right, so in this session, we'll actually have 2 sessions dedicated to this today. This first part, we're going to talk really about almost all the accounts payable functions is what we're going to do, all the AP transactional areas. We'll focus to start with on vendor invoice processing and paying vendors. We'll review the credit card payments piece, look at recurring invoices. So this along with several other AP transactional things we will look at to start with. After the break at roughly 10 o'clock, we'll come back and we'll go through all of the GL stuff. So all the GL implications that are associated with it. So we'll start on just the practical, this is how I do these things. And then once we've got all of that covered, we'll take a break, and then we will come back and we'll go through, so what's going on behind the scenes when all of this is happening. So that's kind of the idea behind this session. So I'm going to go through a series of slides that you have, again, in your possession on that jump drive. So I'll go through these slides, and then I'm actually just going to go in and I'm going to model the process like we were doing yesterday. I'll actually go into those areas, features, and functions, and give you a feel. So one of the key things to understand is that with vendor invoice entry, it's a single point of entry for all your vendor invoices. You don't have a separate area for doing inventory matching versus doing non-matching. It's all in one screen. We'll go through that so you can see it.
Yes.
We'll talk about how you could combine multiple purchase orders and those purchase order receipts onto a single invoice. We'll also look at the situation that you might run into where you've received 50 units of a particular item, and yet you receive a bill for 20, and then that next day you receive a bill for the other 30, although you receive them all together. So how would you handle that split quantity? We'll look at those kinds of things in the interface as well. We'll look at how you perform unit cost adjustments for both stock and virtual items. Talk about the implications associated with the cost and how it's updated and where it's updated. We'll talk about how you could process a payment right from the vendor invoice, if you will, or enter payment information if you already prepaid for whatever the particular item is. Let's say that you ordered lunch in and pizza guy shows up and you paid the pizza guy, and now you need to record the transaction after the fact, and you don't want to go through the process of entering a vendor invoice and then going over into the selecting a payment and creating a payment and that kind of thing. You can do it all in the vendor invoice screen itself. We'll talk about some of the time-saving features that are in the app, that are in the vendor invoice area, predefined charges that you can use that are built in, as well as those what you want to build your own to make the process much quicker. And those are some of my favorites because I have to utilize that type of stuff as well. Okay, things that I'll cover again, but you have in your slides so that you can have a little reminder. Just remember that you have the ability to customize the fields the way that you want them in the order that you want them. So you can be absolutely as efficient as you can possibly be. just by setting up those fields and putting them where you want them. Also, just a reminder on shortcuts, like we talked about yesterday, you can create your own hotkey shortcuts to navigate to areas more quickly. Some are already built in, so you'll have all shortcuts already built in. As you can see here, the underlined characters are indicating the hotkey that's available to access that area. Charges area already has that. Alt-C takes you right over into that area. So why do I emphasize this? Well, some companies are really keyboard driven. You don't like to use the mouse at all. So try to be as sensitive to that as we possibly could, so that if you want to keep your hands on the keyboard all the time, that you can do it. All right, when you're creating your customizations, I already showed you this. We'll do a little bit of it again when we're in each of the screens, just because repetition, honestly, is the best teacher, much better than me. We'll just keep going over a couple of these things, kind of drum it in there, and then it'll just become second nature for you. It'll be easy to handle when you need to do it. All right, this is just more information about those shortcut keys. Again, how you create them, right-clicking on the actual particular option that you're looking for, and then this little symbol, you can place it anywhere you want in front of the character that you're looking for. Again, the catch on that is making sure that you don't select a character that's already used for another hotkey. If you do, it's going to use the existing one, not yours. Okay, so there you go. Cannot have duplicate shortcut keys. Hold the Alt key down, hit the shortcut key button, takes you to that. And then obviously the system-wide shortcuts use the Control key in order to initiate, new, open, save, exit. Those are standard throughout the application. You would also find that those are pretty much standard in all Windows applications. So Word, Excel, those kinds of things, those are the same kind of conventions that they use. All right. And then this is information on how you do what we're going to actually do. So let's go ahead and minimize this. All right, let's do a couple of things to start with here. I'm going to go just take maybe 2 or 3 minutes to create a couple purchase orders and receive a couple purchase orders. I'm going to do a couple specials and I'm going to do some stock POs. I know that I have some examples, but I want to create a couple more to work with. So let me just go ahead and do that. Back to sales order entry here for a second. Select a particular customer and input that information. Created more work for myself with my required fields. And it doesn't matter, let's just go with a couple of non-stock items here. Alright, and let's go ahead and buy those lines real quick here. I'm going to make some notes for myself so I know which vendors I'm working with. So there's our PO for that particular item. And also on that, so my PO number. Make sure I get that extra 0 in there. Whipped on that yesterday.
So you're doing 2 POs right there?
So that's actually just one PO.
Oh, okay.
And then I'm going to go create one for stock. And I'm gonna guess that supplier, just looking at the convention that's in here, it's going to for me. And I'll receive some others while I'm out there. Okay, so I got a couple new POs that I can go receive into the system. I could release these. I mean, I shouldn't say release, but I could print or email, or I could mark them as vendor notified. That's the status. It's not released. We don't use that. It's been more than 10 years, and I still make those mistakes at times.
It'd be hard for us too.
So vendor notified is your status. Again, it goes back to, well, what does released mean? And well,
Notified means more than released.
yeah. Although what does released ultimately mean? I mean, I got that all
That's
the
an
time.
internal thing, but if you notify.
It means I printed it. It means I called it in. What does it mean? I mean, so
Notified means a lot more.
vendor notified means for sure that, yeah, if I print, and it only does that if you specifically target it, or if you email it or you print it, that I notify. Doesn't mean that they've acknowledged it back to you yet, but it does mean that you have notified them. All right, so let's just go ahead and add a couple of fat fingered it. Okay, let's receive all of this. I don't have any shortcuts on here. Seven.
So you're not printing any paper that after it's received, it's all computer?
Yep. That one happens to have a landed costing element associated with it, so I can include that if I wanted to at this point. But okay, so I've got a couple examples out there. Let's go ahead and just move into vendor invoices. All right, the vendor invoice screen. Let's go ahead and get it set up here. So, I mean, this vendor address block that you see here hasn't always been in the vendor invoice screen. Added a couple years ago. It is really redundant information. All of the information about the vendor you're working with is all in the dynamic inquiry. So if you want to, you certainly have the ability to just kind of shrink that. If you do not work with landed costing, which most do not, then you could just collapse that area as well to give yourself more room in your matching area there. So you can basically, as again the point being that you can set the screen up exactly the way that you want it. All right, now let's just drag this down just a little bit more. Okay, let's we'll add some more shortcuts as we go, but let's take a look at this particular interface. This is obviously kind of the most important one when it comes to accounts payable in terms of how many transactions and work and energy and effort is going to be made. So we'll just go ahead and start with a new. Again, I can click on any of these options, or I can Control N, to use my keyboard, and then start typing. So we know we've got some inventory out there to match. Let's start simpler. Okay, let's say that this isn't an inventory bill that I have. I'm gonna have to imagine that I've got my bills here, obviously, so I don't have any, but we're going to pretend that we do. So in this case, let's say that we've got a bill for one of our wireless phones, or whatever it may be at our business that we have through Verizon. I'll put in an invoice. I can put in a particular invoice number if it's provided. In some cases, I know for me, on certain kind of monthly recurring charges that I have like this, I usually just put in, some cases I use a date depending on the vendor and the frequency. Some, if it's just, I know it's per month. You guys probably have a better format than I do, but if I got this bill and I knew that it was for the month of February, I actually end up going something like this, February 2017, and then I know I have them every month, and I can, for every year, I can go back. It's easy for me to distinguish. So I can go ahead and put in whatever the amount of the bill is.
Hey, Troy, let me ask you a quick question.
Yeah.
On that PO receipt, is that attached document available at that?
It is.
In that field?
Yeah,
So you can scan the packing slip and attach it right to that PO receipt?
exactly.
Okay, look at that later.
Yep. That is,
How can you look at that
that's
later?
been added, that's been added to the receiving area. That's right. Yeah, I have to actually customize it on there. In fact, I think that's noted in the, I think you noted that in the release notes on that.
Because it's not, there are some caveats to whether you can actually use it or not.
Right.
So it's not on there by default.
Yeah,
So
but
you can put it on there, and then if you needed to find anything associated with that, it actually is getting attached to the originating purchase order. That's where it's,
Okay.
that's where it's going.
So that packing slip would be attached to the original PO?
That's right. So
Okay.
if you needed to go look it up, you would go to the original PO. You'd go right in here to purchase orders. You would put in your PO number, and then right here under attached documents is where you would find
So at our
that
receiving,
packer receiver information.
Have a
at
scanner
our
there.
receiver, you just have a little scanner, he scans his completed
He
receipt.
scans it, attaches, it's good, yep.
Will that attachment follow paper trail from the PO to the payable to the?
It just lives right there with the PO. I mean, I guess, so when you go to the vendor invoice, that did the matching, you have attached documents in there as well, but you could match multiple POs for one vendor invoice if that was the situation. You can drill from that vendor invoice right into the POs that you matched and also have the attached documents there. So in essence, I mean, it'd be an additional click to get to it, to get to that PO interface, but it would in essence be
Better
all
than
there.
going to the filing cabinet.
Oh, yeah.
Open up the drawer.
Right. Yep.
You still have the paper.
But you only have one people.
Well, let's,
Printing all the receiving paperwork.
let's just do this. Let's, I'll attach.
Coming down.
That looks like real serious work.
All right, so there's the attached document for this particular PO. That's what the guy looked like when he did his receiving.
It's happy.
Cuddly.
And we'll attach something here too. All right. Okay, so back to our example. Here we are, we're working with Verizon. And again, I can set this screen up the way that I want, in the order that I want it. So I like vendor here. Now purchase vendor, let me just emphasize what this the situation is. So if you work with a buying group, and this is not a commonly used feature, and some companies don't ever use this. So you could take that field off your screen if you wanted to. But if your company does this, then obviously you wouldn't want to do that. But you could actually enter this right here. This field represents who sent you the bill, who's ultimately getting the payment. This field right here represents who the purchase order was cut to. So if I actually cut the PO to a different vendor but got the bill from another third party, the buying group, then that's how that's addressed. I would then just look up the other purchasing vendor right here, and then that would obviously allow me to bring in that vendor's purchase order receipts into my matching area. All right. I noticed that I think in the example that I had in the slide, the invoice date had been moved up. Whatever you want, again, whatever is best for you in terms of how you load this information. I actually use for all of my service types of bills myself. I use the reference field, and I'll put in, or whatever, I'll put in some reference information there. It just stays with the invoice. It's up to you whether you want to use it. If you want to be more, verbose about it, then you can type in, a big old book if that's what you want to do. So again, going back to these fields, that's the invoice date off of your vendor's invoice. It's used by the system to calculate the due date based on whatever the terms are that are assigned. Discount on or before is a date that the system will automatically populate when the terms involve a discount. So if the terms involve, some 1%, 2%, discount that you get for early pay, then the system will calculate what that discount amount is, and it will also calculate what date that discount is available. Now, just to keep in mind, because we went back and forth on this over time, and we settled on a consensus, which is what we have to do in our business. It doesn't necessarily mean that's always the right way, but we have to pick a consensus when we're writing software like we do. So here's what I'm referring to. The way the discount is calculated is the thing that you need to understand here. So our Acclamare system will calculate your early pay discount based on the subtotal amount of the invoice. So if there are items below the subtotal, freight, surcharges, those for most companies, they are not getting a discount off of those particular items. They're just getting the 2% discount off of product. And so that is how Acclamare is written by default. It calculates the discount solely off of what you've matched in terms of the subtotal. Now, if you don't like what it calculated, because in that scenario you're looking at your bill and they're giving you more because they're including subtotal amounts, then you can manually type in the discount. Okay, it is a calculated value, but you can, in cases where you need to, you can override it and type in what the actual discount is.
How
All
many
right.
different discount codes are available, and can you add your own if it's some
Yeah,
funky
you can
one?
create all your own terms of sale. There's no limit with as many different types of discounts as you want.
Okay,
Mhm.
thank you.
All
But there's
right.
some standard ones that are already in there, the 2% 10.
There are no standard ones in there, but the ones that you have in your current system will get converted into Acclamare.
Okay, thank you.
Yep. So, obviously, terms information, 1099 information, all this is being defaulted from the vendor that you're actually working with, coming right from the vendor master, including once I've entered all my header information that I've got. If I go ahead and press Alt C as in charges. It just pops me right over into the charges area where I'm going to enter my distributions. So if I hit D for default, the system will automatically populate the account with what that vendor's default charge account is. So now,
So that's your GL account showing up right there.
that is 7050 is the account. I can override that. I can put whatever I want in there. I mean, my chart of accounts list is available right in that field. System defaults it for me if I use that option. Now, there are several options available to you in this field. These are the ones that are built in. So you can, as soon as you type, it starts looking through that list to find a match. If I type freight, then it's automatically going to default the freight account that I have set up in there for that shortcut. And I'll show you how those are done in just a second. But I just want you to see that what I did, I hit a D, it pops in that value and knows that that's going to be the default account, as you see here. I'll do a couple of more examples so that we can use a variety of what's in there. All right, so if I have completed, that's all I have to do. If I've completed this posting, I'm going to go ahead and post this invoice. Or I can use post this invoice and add a new one. Now, let's go ahead and customize some of these more common features onto the top of our screen here. Let's create a new toolbar, which isn't required, by the way. You could just string them all on here. I'm going to create a couple of new toolbars so that I can separate stuff. All right, so on this first toolbar that I've created, I'm going to put add items from purchase order for my matching purposes. On this other one, I'm going to add post and add a new invoice. And I'm going to use, as a shortcut on that, that value right there. I'm going to use the P on this.
So then that'll underline the P and you can go Alt P.
That's correct. Okay. And let's on this one, keep in mind that it's the Alt key. The Control key is what fires all those other functions, and the Alt key is what fires your menu up here. So F, E, and A are already occupied. You cannot use those. So let's, on this one, let's go ahead and do, let's do I for right now. We'll see if that's good for us. All right. So we'll go ahead and start another new invoice. Let's go ahead and, in this case, we'll just do a simple matching one, and we'll do several of these. So I put in whatever the vendor's invoice number is. I'm going to write that down because I'm going to use it again in a second to show you that the system will not let you use that again for that vendor. As obviously a protection. Now the amount is a mystery to me. I don't know. I don't have the bill in my hand. So right now I'm going to guess that I've got a bill for $368. Now let's go ahead and add items from a purchase order. So let's use my shortcut key, and there you go. So I could click on that option, or Alt I opens that option. I'm going to go ahead and select a PO. Okay, so now I have my line items available for me to match. Again, it's all in one screen. So I can go down into this area and I'll go through the various different pieces of functionality as we do several of these. but for right now, we're gonna keep it simple. Let's go ahead and select this line right here. So that you can see that's a total of $79.70. That's all I got. So I'm just going to make it a little bit smaller here, but so there you can see how much I still have to match.
Also, we can decide what we want to pay the vendor, that's good.
Yeah, you can always decide that. So if I, at this point, said, all right, the bill was for $125, I've matched $79.70, I'm going to go ahead and post this. System's going to tell me, no, the invoice does not balance, cannot be posted. So at this point, I'm like, oh, okay, so what did I leave out? Well, there are other charges that I got hit with that aren't product related on this invoice. So in the charges area up here, like we were talking about before, I can find, oh, there's a freight charge. So I can use the built-in default. And then, so in some systems that I worked with historically, there was an area on the screen in payables that had a fixed number of fields. Put the freight here, put tax here. And the problem that we had is that, back in, boy, I hate to date myself, but you go back in the late 90s and then the early 2000s when fuel was like going crazy. I mean, fuel was going nuts. And companies started to get all kinds of funky charges.
Yep.
Fuel charges and other types of handling fees. Companies were getting creative to try to figure out how to pass along all of those fees. And what happened is we got situations where I'd get contacted by payables folks and they'd say, where do I put these? Because I don't have fields that match what they're charging me. So in the Acclamare vendor invoice interface, all of your subtotal, stuff that's below your subtotal goes in this charges area, and there's no limit to how you can break that out. I mean, you can put all of it in there. You're not, pigeonholed, if you will, into, well, these are my only optional fields. There's no limit to what you can do in terms of entering that information. So on this line, we'll say that the freight was, $20, and there was also some surcharge, for $10, and there was also some. We got a couple more here. You're not gonna have taxes, but
You bought something that was taxable.
tax for $5, and then if I wanted to, maybe I'm not going to use the variance on this, but maybe there was some other handling.
Or an environmental fee.
There you go. I like that. That's a lot better. If I could spell it. Whatever that may be.
If you do, Miss Wordcheck come in to help you.
No, not here, it doesn't. Okay, so you'll notice when I freeform type my description that it doesn't know what account goes with that. I didn't use one of the built-ins. But I can type whatever I want in there.
And put in.
And now I can specify the number. Yeah, so I can go out there, I just hit a 7, I can start typing the number if I know it. It's just going to logically go find it in this particular, area. And obviously I have no idea, where that's going to end up in this. Oh, I saw.
Can we just say that the accounts payable only has access to certain kinds of accounts? You don't want them to hit like a profit or...
There's no restriction, but I'll show you how you can, create a couple of your own
You know what I'm saying?
pieces. I
Accidents
do.
can happen.
I do. You could still make a mistake and misclass this stuff, and I'll show how you can fix it as we move along. So this now, you'll notice has a subtotal over here to indicate I've got that all in there, and then my amount to match has just been
Zero.
slowly every line I put in, it's been updating. So now my amount to match is 0. So if I'm now I've got my stack of bills, I go ahead and hit Alt P, post this and add a new one, I'm on to the next one. Okay? So now we'll put one in for Verizon. Let's put in February 2017. Oh, I've already entered that. Okay, so how'd this get back in my file? What's going on? I could go ahead and fix it. If it is a second charge, then obviously I could, add some distinguishing characteristic to it, and then go ahead and put in my bill. Alt C for charges, D for default to pop that in, and then Alt P to post it. I'm on to the next one. Okay, so let's go ahead and do one more service bill here, and we'll put in, maybe
So
you
since
get.
that's a different vendor,
This is a different vendor. So
could you use February 17 again?
yeah. So yeah, absolutely. Yeah, let's do a couple.
Uh-huh.
So $125, Alt C, D for default, distributed it in there, Alt P for post, and I'm on to the next one.
Now let me ask you a question. If you have to look up something by invoice number, and you have 2 February 2017, what do you do then?
We'll do it.
Okay.
We'll do it. So you might want to, if you've got multiple bills for that month for different salespeople, and maybe you're putting in their initials and something like this, and then that's how you're distinguishing theirs from somebody else. Okay, so again, default expense and Alt P for post. Okay, now let's just say that we want to do a lookup. Again, here's our options. They're also available in the drop down area, as you can see here. We also recently incorporated the rolling feature. We didn't always have that in vendor invoice. So you can scroll through, and you can use in filtered mode to just look through bills for a particular vendor. So to answer the question that we were looking at here a second ago, I'm going to just indicate I didn't want to start a new one at this point. Control O will open my vendor invoice search, or I could click on the open folder. I can type in February 2017 like this, and it'll pull in all those matches. And of course, just like any of the areas in the searches, I can current balance, I can look at status, and of course I've got a reference here where I can see, oh, this one was for Joe, and then I can pull that in. Now, if I made a mistake, okay, if I made a mistake here, I screwed up, this one really was for the other Verizon account, not VER01, it was for VER02. Then I could go ahead and go, okay, actions, reverse this invoice. As soon as I do that, it does a reversal. So your original GL entry is in there from the first post. Now there's a second one for reversing. And now I could go ahead and say, oops, this I screwed up on this. This is for TJ, and this is actually for the other Verizon. Make that change, and then I can go ahead and post it. Okay? So that way I don't have to actually go do an AR adjustment and adjust it out, and then, go re-enter it. In this case, I just went ahead and made that change. All right? So that reversal feature was incorporated recently, and it's incorporated with the idea that you're doing it in a window of time, that I'm not reversing something. Obviously, if that invoice had been paid or had an adjustment against it, or there's some things that would have prevented the reversal from happening. Has to be basically in posted status like that, in order for you to be able to use that feature. If other things have already happened to the document beyond posting, then it's not going to allow you to do that.
But there is a way to get back to it, to make corrections to it, invoice corrections?
You can always go make an AR adjustment to it.
Okay, but right now, say I go into pay bills because it's Wednesday,
Mhm.
and I know that a certain invoice should show up, and it's not pulled up in my batch.
Yeah.
I can go into invoice corrections, look up that invoice, and, oh, she accidentally hit 2015, or 2018, or whatever.
You would just come in here, find it, reverse it, make the change,
Okay.
post it.
And the same thing with the discount, if a so it's never locked in a batch, because right now.
Right.
I-
Yeah, because we don't do any batch.
Okay, so it is never, because if it's held up and I can't make the change to it, okay. So
You can
there's no
always
such-
do that,
okay,
but we just
thank you.
did. It's always going to be available to you in there.
And
Um,
you said yesterday that these screens can be management control. Donna could control, if she had 3 different people doing accounts payable, and she didn't want them to each have their own screen, that particular workstation is.
Also, that looks the way that she wants. She could
Yeah, but
customize it.
everybody learns it. If they have a suggestion that something else, they can come to her and she makes it available to everyone.
Sure.
I mean,
Yeah, it's up to you in terms of how you want to educate your people in terms of what they can do on those screens. I mean, obviously, customizing your screens the way I've done it is not really intuitive. We have people out there that operate on their Windows, never knowing for years that they can, move stuff around,
you don't have
adjust
to
or
show
whatever.
them, they'll learn. what
Sometimes
can
they do, sometimes they don't.
So you can lock the screen.
You cannot lock that down. You cannot do that. You cannot, there's no way for you to say, I mean, you can save the customizations to the database so that if they screw up the screen, you can restore it back to its original state, but you can't prevent them from actually manipulating the customizations. I mean, on their computer. They get in there and get funky, they can get in there and get funky. But you can get it back, but let's keep going here on the payable stuff. So a couple of key things to keep in mind. We've looked at how, for instance, terms and this 1099 field's going to get defaulted, the default charge account. Let's look at the vendor screen for just a second. Vendor maintenance, pretty simple area in the application. Let's go pull up a particular vendor. So here's my vendor maintenance screen. Basically, I've got an address, payee address. You can see on the left-hand side, that's their default terms that gets pulled into their vendor invoice. If you have multiple profit centers, then, and one vendor is just always with some, different location with Alabama or whatever, you could default in that profit center. And a default expense account. Let me just comment on this. Inventory suppliers. So it would be my preference. I mean, when you're dealing with inventory suppliers, I mean, you can put whatever account in there that you want, but inventory suppliers should be matched. I mean, this default expense account is never going to get used, in theory, by an inventory supplier, because the matching is going to take care of all the GL postings. This default expense account is for what goes in that charges area, independent of those lines. So it shouldn't be inventory, it shouldn't be purchases. I mean, frankly, my opinion would be with your inventory suppliers, maybe you tie your inventory suppliers to some other account that you call whatever you want, so that you can hound whoever is posting stuff into that. Because again, there's no reason for them to be posting and hitting inventory manually in that way, because the system automatically does that stuff. So the only thing that this account right here can do for an inventory supplier, I mean, there are exceptions. Can't say that 100% of the time it would never be right, but to me, 99% of the time it would be not right. They should not be using an inventory supplier and posting to the inventory account directly, because if they do that, then there's no corresponding entry being made to the layers, to the actual inventory layers themselves. So you can, screw up your reconciliation relative to your inventory matching your GL. So again, here's the point. I see some puzzled looks, so I don't want to confuse folks. This charges area right here is where that default expense will pop in and get used and distribute funds. If you're using this section of vendor invoicing and you're sticking dollars into inventory, you better know what you're doing, because otherwise you're screwing it up.
Because it's always going to go to the bottom part first.
Because this is where you do your matching,
Right.
and that's what handles all your inventory. If you're touching this area right here and sticking stuff into your inventory accounts, doesn't matter what inventory account, you're screwing it up. Okay? Unless it's one of those 1% things that I can't think of right now, to be honest with you, that I'm just not willing to never say never. But again, that's just a gotcha to just keep aware of. And so if you set that account for your inventory suppliers to, create some account in your chart of accounts, call it, put in, I've got a 1210, 1211 in there, put in a 1219, some weird number right there that says inventory screw ups. Inventory screw ups in AP. All right, give it as big a name as you want.
You call it Y with a question.
Exactly. Inventory screw ups in AP. Why? Question. So then you can go, run it down fairly easily, figure out what happened there, because you can go do a GL inquiry on account 1219. It'll show when that account got hit, and it'll actually have a reference to the invoice number in the GL inquiry.
What you're talking about ties into yesterday with the layers and the costing.
Exactly. That's exactly
You're
right.
absolutely right. You do that.
So this is just, this for me ends up being an accident waiting to happen. Unless, there's some companies where the person that's handling their GL and accounting and bookkeeping is just right on it. They're on top of it. And they can manage it however they want. I'm just saying, for a lot of you, a good practice would be to tie that thing to some other inventory account so that you can just easily find when that happens. Somebody did something. Inevitably, what'll end up happening is it's some AP person that doesn't know where to code it, and they don't want to ask because you're gone, and they need to get it done, or they already feel sheepish about asking questions because they've asked too many, and so then they're just going to go, this doesn't match, I can't find the PO, it's not out there, I need to get the bill in, so default expense, it's got to go into inventory. Well, no. So, but there you go. That's just a tip.
Can you, if you had an AP clerk, this is kind of like to your question, if you had an AP clerk, can you run them, isn't there like a vendor AP distribution report? You could run that at the end of the day and
Sure.
just look at it, and you can see what accounts they've hit.
Absolutely. That's a really good idea.
And if it's
Well,
not
you can-
expensive, you can just
So,
highlight.
yeah.
it.
On the general ledger, you can read.
Yeah, you can definitely do that. That's a good idea. You could set that up on a subscription, to come to whoever's responsible for AP or GL at your business, to where that thing just comes right into your email each evening. You can look at quickly eyeball the postings from entries that day and, you know, see if you look good, catch it right then.
Well, if you want general ledger inquiry, for everything that posted to the inventory account for vendor invoice.
What's that?
If you want a general ledger inquiry, for everything that posted to the inventory account for a vendor invoice.
But what we're talking about is looking at the.
They should not come to the inventory account for the vendor invoice.
So if I go in and I look at, is that account? Show you what I'm talking about. I'm not sure if I'm following you, but I'm gonna guess that I am. It's not in the executive inquiry.
Go to,
So general ledger inquiry,
yeah, the account should be purchases or
and I come in here and I'm gonna put in, what was it? 7050 was telephone, right?
no, not about telephone. Talk about the thing that you don't want.
Doesn't, I'm just, if I come in here and run this, probably don't have an index on my reference ID out there. This is gonna run for a second. My little laptop's got Source Associates database on it, so I'm gonna make a change here. Chug it. I got the server and the middle tier and the client and everything on this little laptop of mine here. It's just, I'll want to look at those inquiries here in a little while anyway, so.
Can that be being done in the background while you're working on something else?
The inquiry? Inquiry should just fire within a second. Oh, I'm just gonna make a change so that it does. And let's just see where it's at here. Still running. If you need to get a drink real quick, it'll be probably 2 minutes till I have this set up the way that I want it here. All right, so primary key. Just ignore what I'm doing, okay? All right. Okay, so I guess I chased a couple people away. I gave them 2 minutes, and
They took it.
they didn't believe it was only 2 minutes.
What I meant is you run it on the account, on the purchases account, and there shouldn't be no transaction from a vendor invoice. Because nothing comes from a vendor invoice. If the AP clerk put in a.
So are you talking, you don't see a vendor invoice reference right here like I do?
No, no vendor invoice. There should never be a vendor invoice under the purchases account
Oh,
or
yes.
the inventory.
I follow you. I follow you. Correct. Yeah, I'm sorry, this is a totally different thing. I guess this is what I want to just illustrate for you based on some of those other questions in terms of sleuthing different stuff out. Like if you did have that, APY account out there, then this provides you the ability to go put in that account, specify I want to look at activity in the month, and then I can see specifically what invoices are actually hitting that particular account. So I get a reference to the actual invoice. I can see, this was a vendor invoice transaction that did it, and that's what hit it. That's what hit it and when. I can also add to my column chooser. I can add the date that they did it in terms of the GL inquiry, including the time, which cannot be manipulated, by the way. So this date and time cannot be manipulated, nor can this, unless they obviously logged in as somebody else. But so you can see the actual date and time and who did it. And I have had calls over the years where somebody said, hey, somebody screwed this up, I've got this, that, or the other, can you go in and figure out what happened? I'll go do a quick inquiry like this, and I'll get back to them and I'll say, you did it. Unless somebody else has your ID, you did it on this date and time. And then I'll be like, oh, curses, whatever it is. So that's kind of how that'll go down. I'm going to now just, while I got everybody, I'm going to test this again real quick. So there you go. Once I add those two indexes, it goes so much faster. So, all right. And we'll probably use that a little bit more
So
when we're
what was
looking
he
in the GL
referencing
session.
then? You said it was something else.
He was saying that it should never, like we were talking about, no vendor invoice should hit the purchases account or this particular account, which is exactly right. It should not. Yep. All right. So back to our vendor maintenance screen. Okay. And I would just add, if your GL inquiry doesn't move that fast, like this one does right now, then you just need a little bit of performance tuning on it, just like I just did right there. Okay? All right, moving on. So address and payee information, nothing there that we need to go over. Just worth mentioning here in the screen, just so that you know, or if you haven't seen the interface in the past, you've got other areas off of vendor maintenance that account for a lot more information. If you're used to going, our screens, we chose to keep them as simple as possible, and then you can customize onto the top of your screen those particular areas that are of interest to you and your particular job or role assignment. So I guess what I'm getting at here is that if you're used to screens that are a lot busier, we specifically went away from that to try to make the screens as simple and as clean as possible so that you could find the information that you're looking for quickly. But these are other areas just off of your vendor buying targets, discounts for purchase orders, vendor families, contacts with that particular vendor. It's where you can come and put in all the information for those contacts, email addresses, phone numbers, whatever it may be. Additionally, you have a section under maintenance here called alerts. You guys would know those as memos. That's what we have everywhere in terms of item, customer, vendor, a couple of different other areas. Yeah.
What's a vendor family?
A vendor family. So, good question. It's used for discounting and clustering your vendor's items. So you can have your own product groups within Acclamare, and you can have your own families within Acclamare. This is for those scenarios where your vendor says, you get a discount if you buy this group from this family of items. So you can put their family into the vendor item record within Acclamare to kind of make it easier for you to basically take advantage of things that your vendor says that you can take advantage of by those groups of items, the way they've classified them. So it's really, go ahead.
200 suppliers, we want to separate them into Chinese, Taiwan, international. Would this be an application for that?
Yeah,
With class.
absolutely, you could use it like that. It's totally user defined. So,
And you can report out, right?
yes, exactly. That's the key. That's exactly right.
You can use vendor classes.
What's that?
You can use vendor classes for
Yeah, you could use vendor classes. We have one company that's actually even, Kimberly's here today, that again, classes are defined by you. You could do something similar, but that's not associated to product. If you wanted to be able to kind of basically take a granular approach to a specific vendor. I got vendor A, and they supply us with these 5,000 items. And of vendor A's 5,000 items, they break them into the following groups. This is how they do it. You could use it for that, or you could use it to do what kind of you're talking about. However you wanted to create that, that's how that would be done. But classes are for payment classes, is what they were originally designed for. We've added this field into the pay vendors area. I'll show you that when I get there. That will basically allow you to group vendors together. I pay these guys on the 10th of every month. I pay these guys on the 20th of every month. That kind of thing. If you wanted to take that approach, vendor classes can be used for that, and then the grid will assist you in doing that. Like I said, I'll show you that in just a little bit. I think the rest of these fields.
You had a rebate up there in that maintenance?
Oh yeah, vendor rebates. Correct. So this is where you can set up a couple of different rebate types. So you can associate. You get, like I talked about this, I think a little bit yesterday. This is where, you have those situations where a vendor is protecting your margin when you sell an item to a particular customer, or it might just be overall rebates that you accumulate. If you buy these items on this purchase order, you'll get a kickback of 3% in terms of rebate.
Can it be tracked on a yearly basis if you set that up with the rebate? I mean,
you could produce a report that actually shows you everything on a yearly basis that way, but these will actually impact the cost of the item at the time of receipt.
okay, so no, that's not.
It'll actually be, included in the general ledger and everything. It accrues them. So they'll accrue within your GL. So you can actually see, like a receivable, I've got regular accounts receivable, I got vendor rebates receivable to the tune of this much money.
But they're all different rebates by by supplier.
Sure.
So
And
that would not be
we
That's not what
but we do that as well.
We're part of a buying group, and so on an annual basis, we get,
Got ya.
and it's nice to be able to track. They send us a spreadsheet with what they say we've purchased throughout the year. Then I have to go and do research to see what matches up. So if we could put them in a group saying, hey, these are the ones I need to look at.
I've done that with a couple of
What
customers.
did you do?
You made a class.
A class, okay, so you
You
put
can
them in a
run-
class.
and
You
run
could
the
definitely
report
put them in a
based on
class. You could create your own custom field. There's
Okay.
10 custom fields available in there.
Okay.
But I've written a couple reports for other companies that
Okay.
do the exact same thing.
Okay.
And for them, now, all they do is go put in the date range
Right.
and run it, and it
Okay.
tells them exactly what the numbers
Yeah,
are.
and that's
For
more
for
what
each
we're,
of those customers you classify,
vendors.
vendors.
Yeah.
That's more what I'm asking, I
Yeah.
think, just because,
Yeah, this is more of a real-time
yeah, I
accrual
understand.
in your GL.
Okay, thank you.
Yep, no problem. Vendor contracts, these are cost contracts. So you can create your own pricing contract for selling, like we covered in depth yesterday, you can also put a contract in that you've got with your vendor so that controls your costing as well. Document settings I'll talk about this afternoon. No reason to go into that. Different landed costing elements that you can create, freight, duty, tariff, whatever the fees are, other surcharge, pallet charges, whatever you want to try to roll into the cost of your items from a landed costing standpoint. Locations, right now, the way that locations work, they're tied into vendor returns only at this point in time. This basically allows you to have multi-locations for a vendor so that although you're buying from this location, you have to return to a different address, even though it's the same vendor.
Yes.
So
Inspire does not have that.
that's what you see there. That's right now presently just associated with vendor returns. Okay, let's look at just a couple other maintenance areas here. Again, vendor contacts, we talked about that. Classes, this is where you go define and set up your own. I'm going to come to recurring invoices later. This is what I want to talk about right now, vendor invoice charge maintenance. I really like this area. It really saves me a ton of time. So this screen right here is where you can quickly be able to pop stuff in. So there's another invoice. Okay, let's do a few more things in here. Put in a couple more. We'll start doing some matching.
So that takes the place of a recurring journal.
No.
This is your, like,
Nope.
the
Okay.
guys go out and buy donuts to give.
Okay.
Yeah, this is just so you can quickly create your own charges. I'll give you an example where I really use these. I finally figured one out. Sometimes when I'm on the spot, takes me a second, get the wheels clicking here. I have set up several that come on the company's monthly credit card. So there's recurring bills that go against my monthly credit card. So when I get my credit card statement and I'm entering it, I have some monthly subscriptions that are hitting that. So I've set those up with their own charge detail, knowing what accounts those go to, because when I'm putting in a credit card bill and I've got a list of all kinds of charges that go to a myriad of different accounts. I might end up.
Let your wife use your credit card.
No, Kevin.
I don't have it.
No, but some of them are related to
Oh, yeah.
what you do. So, needless to say, when I'm putting in a credit card bill, let's just, I don't know what he's got in there for, maybe he's got American Express. Okay, he's got an Amex in there. When I put in, February bill, I don't like those caps. When I start putting that in, I might, just to, again, illustrate a point, I might have this for, $157. I might have this for $145. I might have, lunch with Joe. And then obviously I'm going to code that wherever I want to code that, based on, what my account structure is, what my available options are. I thought I saw one that was like meals and entertainment. I'm sure he's got one in here, but
Can that be sorted alpha?
yeah,
Okay.
yep. There we go.
Add some accounts.
Okay, so again, the idea here is now I'm putting in my credit
It's a
card.
nice lunch. I'll go to lunch with you.
Yeah. Yep, we went to the Steak and Chop House. So again, the idea here is that these first two lines, if I have a credit card bill, which anybody that's in AP at your business, you probably have one. When you get that, if you have lines on it that are on there every single month, and they are going to go to the same GL account every month, you should set up in the charge maintenance area, just a shortcut to it. So then
And
you
would
don't
that
have
be
to.
linked with that particular account? If you set it up in charge maintenance, is it linked only to Amex?
No.
It's
No.
linked
No,
to
no,
everything.
it's
Okay.
independent.
Okay.
It's
That's what I
just
thought.
for this area.
Okay.
It has nothing to do with a
Okay.
particular vendor. No, that's a
Okay.
good question. It's, you can use it over and over again for whatever vendor
It's your
you
normal
want.
chart of accounts that you're hitting here.
What's that?
It's your normal chart of accounts
Mm-hmm.
that you're hitting here.
Absolutely.
Yes.
And you could have another lunch with Joe and another lunch with Joe, amounts
Exactly.
there. Okay.
So, and sometimes that's the way I'll do it. I'll put in something more like, Mills in DFW, customer conference like this, and then maybe that was,
$10.
$80, exactly. And then I'll put in, Mills in, SLC. Oh,
I'm kidding.
Whatever, the rest.
If it's on his nickel, why do you get it?
All right, so again, whatever you want to type in the charge, find the account in this fashion, or
That's good.
better yet, this just makes your entry so much faster. You won't believe how much time that'll save you if you aren't using it right now.
It's basically a customer-defined charge, is basically what it is, right?
Right,
You set-
that is
you set
exactly
them up
what it is.
yourself, and
It's a custom-defined charge shortcut. These are the ones that are built in, right, here below. And the ones that are built in you can see there, and then yours are just added to the list.
But you build it yourself.
These three I built.
He just did those.
I did payroll, Doug, and Chris truck lease. I did those. Freight, taxes, surcharge, variance, and default expense are built in. Now, default expense ties to that vendor that is in question. That's their default expense account. So any of your non-inventory suppliers should be tied to whatever that account is, and then you just use their default expense and off you go. Quick is quick. These other four, freight, taxes, surcharge, variance. Let me just explain where they come from, and then I'll explain where they get used and why you're using them and when you're entering a vendor invoice. So let's close this and go right over here to file maintenance, general ledger, and we'll go right in here to what's called company posting accounts. This is a system level, set it up, don't touch it, area of the application. Once you've got it done, it's done. So he doesn't have an exchange gain or we added that with foreign currency long after he was on the system. Let's just put that in here for right now. Okay. This schedule that you see here has within it freight expense. That's what ties, that right there is what ties to your vendor invoice shortcut in that charges area. This line right here. And this line right here also ties to the taxes one. And this one right here ties to the surcharge one. And so you got freight, you got your tax, you got your surcharge, and there was one more, right?
Variance.
The variance is right there. Okay? So those other four, they're just coming from this setup right there. That's where they are. So if you're like using one, you're like, oops, that's not actually where we want that to default to when we use surcharge. we want it to go to a different account, then this is where you would come to make that change, and then I would assume that would pretty much be where you want it from then on. That's just a setup area, that's where it's used. So again, if you're looking at that freight expense, again, anything here that says expense, it's interpreting, for the most part, that's a part of that payables piece, as you can see with those other fields. Freight that's associated with charging your customers is tied to the carrier. It's not tied to this at all. So each carrier could have their own freight account. And for most companies, that's considered freight revenue or income, not expense. I mean, for some companies, maybe, depending on how they process and how they're set up, it could be an expense. But for most, that's a revenue generator. Whereas this is always on the AP side. It's tied to that shortcut. All right. Okay, back to our vendor invoice entry. So let's go ahead and do some matching. Let's go do some different types of matching here for a second. All right. Start new. Let's go ahead and put in our vendor, whatever the invoice date happens to be. Obviously, it's going to be on their printed copy. We'll go ahead and say that it was 3/1, and I'll put in whatever their invoice number is. And then, of course, I'm guessing on this, I'll put in some amount, whatever. I don't have the bill in front of me. I want to go ahead and add items from the purchase order. So I'll find a PO. Okay, so I now have identified my PO. I'm going to go ahead and select that line right there. Now, this line below here, I can see, for whatever reason, when the PO got created, there's no cost. There's no cost on that PO. It's been fully received. So obviously the vendor is charging me something for it. And this is where, again, I'd say you could get yourself into trouble if you think you're going to outsmart it and come up here and stuff money into inventory. That's just not going to resolve anything. At this point, whatever they charged you, I'm going to need to do a unit cost adjustment. By clicking the invoice cost field here on that particular line, once I select the line, yep, if I try to type in here, I cannot type in there, okay? That invoice cost is going to be reflective of what the PO cost is, or what it's going to be after I do my unit cost adjustment. So there's my button, do a unit cost adjustment. Go ahead and select that. It's going to pop open a little screen here for me to go ahead and do a unit cost adjustment. So at this point, I can go ahead and enter whatever the cost is that I whiffed on. Obviously, in this case, it's per 100. I'm going to go with something probably much larger than what it would probably be. But in this case, there you go. It was $42.50 per 100. And so there's my adjustment, $637.50. If I go ahead and post this adjustment,
That number will then hit the last cost then?
and so that number is going to go ahead and update the last cost. It's going to update the associated purchase order. As
That's
you
what
can-
I know now is Control U, if
Yes.
you remember,
Yeah,
back then.
that is.
Okay,
Yeah.
making sure that that's what,
That's exactly
Now-
what it is.
sometimes when I currently do a Control U, it's not, it might be ordered for a customer, so you have to, maybe there's 50
Oh,
of
you
them.
have to distribute it.
Yes, do I have to,
Nope,
we
because
do
it
not?
knows
Okay.
who they've went to.
Okay,
So it'll actually show you in that unit
Okay.
cost adjustment, it'll say this many are still in inventory.
Right.
And then underneath it, it'll actually show you the invoices where the additional
right.
funds are being
Right, and
distributed.
sometimes you have to go on a search, like through.
Nope.
Okay,
It knows what they are.
Okay.
It just pulls them in and says, this is where it's going.
If you have two warehouses and some were already transferred to the other warehouse, it will not do those.
That's correct. I mean, there are some limitations. You know, that stuff gets gobbled up into certain kinds of transactions. It gets hard for us to track, and in those cases, it ends up getting, I think we've ended up variance. I think it goes to a variance account, because
So
we
if
can't
you
catch
went
the cost
one
of
PO
it.
and you bought it for 3 different warehouses, it got shipped to 3 different warehouses, is that where this creates a problem?
No, well, once it comes in, it's fine, but then if that inventory gets committed onto a transfer and then sent to another warehouse,
That's
and then from that, in that warehouse, it gets put on a kit, which gets consumed by a customer on an invoice, and you know, all bets are off in terms of that. So we'll distribute and change what we can. The difference is then written to variance.
But if it's being received in one place, then chances are it's able to be
Yeah,
paid
right.
from that.
In the past, you couldn't do a unit adjustment on an item that
Days
got
work in the
consumed.
base time.
It's a new feature.
What's that?
In the past, or in my system, at least in my version, you cannot do unit adjustment on a product that got consumed. Is this something new?
It's been consumed?
Yeah, meaning
No,
not
you can.
invoiced. Oh, you can?
Absolutely you can. If it's been consumed on an invoice, the system will show you the invoices where it's been consumed. Yeah, absolutely you can.
Because that part, those items are gonna be assigned to that particular invoice.
Right. Exactly.
Does that adjust commissions as well?
That just is something that I think's in the queue, though.
It's in the queue, but it does not.
It's something that's been requested.
Yeah, it should.
It just, again, it can get
Zero
kind of,
cost.
it gets kind of nasty across periods and,
You do it after the fact.
Oh.
Like you call your salesperson, I need the money back. I mean,
Right.
You owe me $5. I mean, you know what you're gonna do.
yeah.
You go broke.
All right, so we went ahead at this point and we've matched our invoice up. We've got our quantity, we've got our costs, we're good. Again, we still have some money out here to distribute, you know, because there's some freight charge out there for $50, and then there's some surcharge amount out there for $20. And then let's say that they just hit us with some additional handling fee, which we want, for whatever reason, to break out into some other account. You know, I don't know. I'm just giving an example. That's funny, actually.
Newman.
Seinfeld.
Yeah.
You Seinfeld folks. All right, so there's your distribution. There's your invoices done. Post it and add a new one. Okay, let's do a couple of other different types of things in this interface, and we'll almost have exhausted it for right now, which is okay. We have plenty of time, particularly this afternoon, to go through additional stuff that I'm not covering yet. So let's go another matching. Okay, this vendor, let's go ahead and put in whatever. And again, we're going to edit it anyway, so it doesn't matter. And let's add another PO. 381 all gone. Okay, good. Okay, so 381, let's just take a look at this. Okay, good. Okay, so these two right here are actually special orders. They're actually tied to a sales order. Not that, again, that the AP person would care about that. But let's go ahead and indicate that, the cost on this is actually, you know, $19.50. So we do a unit cost adjustment. Right now, because that thing hasn't been sold, you can see it's sitting in virtual inventory. Hasn't been consumed by that order. So it's going to go ahead and make the adjustment there. Maybe we'll go bill one here after the break so that we can actually see it go back to the sales invoice, and you can see a couple of those. So let's just say that we got a bill, and for whatever reason, although we received 10, the vendor's only billing us for 5 right now. That's how you split it. So I just changed the quantity invoiced right here. So I click in the quantity invoice value right there, say I'm only being billed for 5 of those right now, and on this line I'm only being billed for, you know, 7 right now.
What happens if it's the other way? We ask for 10 and they send us 12, and they're invoicing us for 12, and we receive 12, but the original PO only had 10.
Okay, and you only received if you received 12, it would show 12.
Okay.
Okay, if the counter.
Even though the PO had said 10, they can override it when they receive to show the 12.
That's
Okay,
right.
all right.
So-
So they don't have to create a separate PO to receive those other two.
No, they don't.
Okay.
So they just put in whatever they received, and then you go with it. Now, if they billed you for more than you received,
Right,
then you got a question to deal with, right?
yes,
I got to talk to the warehouse.
yes,
Did
Did
we
you count
actually
those
get
right?
this?
yes,
They say, no, we didn't.
right,
So now, what is the product and how much is it?
right.
It's 50 cents more. Is it worth my call? Do I call? Do I just put it in for 50 cents less and deal with it then? Or do I not want to deal with it at all and pay the extra 50 cents? You know, if it was that scenario, then you would variance it up at the top.
So you'd go up to a charges and make it a variance.
Yep, you just click right in this, you'd click right in here and you'd hit variance and put in the difference, all right? Whatever it is. So, why do I bring that up? Because there might be situations where, you know, let's say that you get a bill and it's got 20 line items on it, and you put in the amount and you hit the master check right here to check all lines, and you're off by
Penny.
some pennies, 1,
$1.22.
4, whatever. Then you would just go right in here to variance, and it would automatically stick those 4 cents into that variance account.
That happens.
Is there a rule of thumb as to a dollar level that,
You make it up.
Created by your business. Yep, totally up to you guys. You can variance as much
Don't
as you
give it too
want
much.
or as little as you want, but at your place of business, you're like, we don't want to variance more than, you know, $1. We don't want to variance more than 5, whatever. You know, you guys can make that call when you do it. But that is exactly what that variance
because
line
you gotta put a price on the
is,
time to
is
research?
built in for. I don't want to spend the time
Right,
to go through all these lines and do a UCA, unit cost adjustment. It's not worth it. I'm just going to variance that nickel, and I'm done.
okay.
In that scenario that you're talking about, since your cost is driven, PO receipt driven, then the purchase order, I'm assuming the purchase order has the wrong cost on it for whatever reason.
Mhm.
Now that's adding a layer into your inventory at the wrong cost. I mean, obviously if it's 4 cents, it's not a big deal, but I'm just saying
In the
that
real
doesn't,
world.
if you do it, like, if you go up and you variance it up there, your layer is now a little bit off.
Your layer's on from the standpoint that it'll update the layer. So
If
it'll,
you put it up top in the chart.
no.
He's talking specifically
Right.
about variance.
Oh, I got you. Yeah, you're correct. You
Okay.
are absolutely correct.
Okay.
Your inventory is lying.
So if your
But, I mean,
inventory
if
is now
it's
off,
a $5 variance.
That's
who
right.
cares? It's not gonna, on the average costing, it's not gonna matter. But
That's
I'm just
right.
saying it's the
but
$50
over
amount you
but
don't
over
pay.
time,
It
you know,
will.
it's going to get off. So that's kind of where we talk about, you know, again, it's how meticulous are you going to be? You know, what's your business rule on that kind of stuff? So, I mean, if you're dealing with, you know, $1.5 million in on-hand inventory, what's your threshold for
Variance.
a variance, for your valuation not tying to your GL? What's your threshold? You know, I mean, it's, if you are literally, if you compare it and you're off by $500 on 1.5 million, you know, if you compute that out, you know, it's literally hundreds of a percent difference. And so, you know, that's what you live with. I mean, if you know, again, it's that $500, is it real or not real? You know, it could go up or down. You know, I mean, you're not always losing money on that deal. So
At what point does the price get corrected, though, to the correct?
You make that decision.
only if you do a UCA.
Okay, only if you do the UCA.
If you do a unit cost adjustment, it fixes the layers. Now, but his point is a little different. His point is different. So he's saying anytime you variance, and he's right, anytime you variance, you're creating a discrepancy
Right.
between your layers and your inventory GL. And that's absolutely right. You know, that's absolutely right, because you didn't go fix the penny that's in the layer, and you just took the penny
Right.
and stuffed it in variance.
Right.
So that you're absolutely right. So, you know, theoretically, if you got, if your company was really on top of it, I mean, maybe you are, but I mean, if your company was just like, we're on it, you would look at your inventory valuation, compare it to your inventory GL accounts that are in question. You'd see your difference and go look at your inventory variance account to kind of see if it makes up some of that difference. And then now you have a more reasonable tie. Does that make sense?
Yep.
I'm with you, 100%. Okay? Any other questions on that? That makes good sense, yeah. Good comment.
Back to where your PO receipt was 10, but you received 12 into inventory. Well, they shipped you 12 and they billed you for 12, but you only received in 10.
Yeah.
Now, the PO is already fully received, and you have to get 2 back into inventory. Can you do another PO and tie 2 POs to 1 invoice so then you can get the variances?
Absolutely. So, you know, I mean, if they were special ordered, now you have a problem, because that's tied to a customer sales order, that's tied to an invoice, and, you know, yeah, now that's different. But if it was stuff that was coming into stock, absolutely, you could go over, create another PO.
Or you may stop the one you got for special order.
There's another, there's a,
Workaround.
I call it an Easter egg, but you have the ability in the purchase order. There's a field that's not on your screen readily, that in your vertical grid, that you can customize in, which is called purchase order number. It actually will allow you to manually manipulate the PO number. And you could go in and create a new PO. It'll assign it the next PO number in sequence, but you're like, this really should have been on that PO blah, blah, blah. You could change the number to be that number. Now in Acclamare, you will have 2 POs with that number. There's no problem. It causes us no grief whatsoever. It causes the system no grief whatsoever, because we don't key off of that value. It's just an English value for your benefit. I mean, because behind the scenes, there is a unique identifier for each of those POs that knows that they're separate and when they were done and everything else. PO numbers for you. So then when you come in here, I mean, they don't have to be the same number, but if they are, you can pull them both in. If they're not, you can pull them both in. Because in this case, like when I'm doing my matching right here, I'm putting in the vendor and I'm putting in the PO number. But if I come up here to add items from a purchase order, I can put in that one's already done. That one's done. I don't have another one in there, do I? I can go. I could go enter another one.
They shipped you something you didn't even order.
It's 3. I'm putting in the wrong sequence here. That's not the one I have in there, right? Okay. I didn't have any more on that one. Let's try a different one. 383. I was just seeing if I had another one that I could throw in there that's on this vendor, but I don't have one. But you can keep adding more POs into that section. So I mean, you don't have to have just one. Well, let's just do this. Add items from this vendor. Yeah. Okay. So if I would have known 379 or 377 or 78 or 278, these were already out there, not matched. So point is, you just because, I mean, you got this one invoice, you can match one invoice to multiple POs. So I could then, I can match this one, I can match this one, I can match this one.
But the receiving clerk would have had to create that PO for those extra two?
Correct.
Okay,
Or you would have.
or, right,
Go put the PO in, receive it.
right.
Yep. That's exactly right. So let's split this one, that's PO 379. Let's split that one, and let's split that one.
77,
What's that?
77, 377, in case
Oh,
you need
thank
to
you.
write it down.
Yes. Okay, so we'll split those, and we'll come up here. If I need to delete a charge line, I click on the
Caret.
row indicator,
Row indicator.
and I can delete the line just like that. Just highlight it, hit the delete key. All right, we'll go ahead now, variance, whatever the rest of this is. Boy, this wire doesn't cost much. All right, let's just go ahead and post it.
But you make a lot of it.
That's horrible. All right, so we'll put in one more invoice here. We'll go a lot smaller. And we're going to add items from the purchase order. 377. Okay, only 250 left now. Originally it had 500. And then I can add, oh, is that the one I just did?
Yeah, 379.
Genius. Okay. So, and there's the 100 that I split out on that. So that's all split out now. Again, I can drill to the original document. I can see that 200 in reality is what came in originally, but I've only got 100 left to match against the receipt.
Is there a time and date stamp on the receiving?
Yeah, internally, there absolutely is.
I mean, that you can drill down and see, hey, you got this last Tuesday at 10 o'clock in the morning, and the other came in Thursday.
Well, yeah. I guess you could do it in the layers. We'd have to add we'd have to add.
Because right
the
now, I mean, we
timestamp. I
get
know it's in
receiving
there.
paperwork that has a time and day, and sometimes, we're calling one of our locations saying, hey, do you remember last Tuesday when this came in and you were
They
shorted?
scan it to you.
Yeah, but they're gonna only scan the packing slip, they're not gonna scan the receipt worksheet.
It would be
They could
attached.
do whatever you want.
Yes.
It would be attached.
Maybe that's something that we can, I'll make a note of it, and see if that's something that, I mean, we haven't had the request before, but doesn't mean that it's something we couldn't investigate.
Doesn't mean that they'll remember anything. Just tell them.
No, but sometimes it helps jog their memory,
Okay.
When you're doing an inventory, AP inventory invoice,
What's that?
when you're doing an inventory AP invoice and you're pulling in what you PO receipts that you pulled in,
Yeah.
in the actions button, is there like a purchase order receiving report that you pull in?
There-
That's what's on ours. We can go in and when they receive it in, it generates a purchase order receiving report.
Oh, definitely in the receiving area, absolutely, but not in the vendor invoice screen.
Yeah, it's supposed to be there interesting. It's a PO receiving report.
Are they attaching it to the PO?
It's
'Cause they
pulling-
could.
I think it's pulling in, it may be based on the handhelds interaction from that. But sometimes when I pull in a PO receiving report, it won't pull in the receivings over here.
Ah, but you're
So
using,
then I have to go in and just either pull in everything that's been received for that vendor and then go line item by line item, or I have to go in and just do it PO by PO, and we have multiple POs off of like a 12-page.
There is a
Invoice.
add from receipt if you know your receipt number.
yeah, that's true.
PO receipt,
Yeah,
What now?
this option is what he's talking about right
Yeah, but
here.
sometimes it won't pull in the receivings from that. It's just like it will not pull it in.
Oh,
Yeah.
when you have the receipt number,
Yes, sir. When I have the receipt number.
we'd have to just test it and look at it.
Yeah. So I talked to Doug and he says there's nothing you can do. It's like you just have to pull it in PO by PO. And I'm like,
No, you don't.
okay.
All right, let's go ahead and take a break, 10 o'clock.
Is there the put away report still too?
Yep.